So well done to Will Parker. Category B rookie, has barely been at the helm of Collingwood for a few months. I think he played Big Bash less than 100 days ago, so there's obviously a lot of potential behind him, and he's only played a couple games in the VFL in the last few weeks, so clearly there's something to really like about Will Parker if he's coming in this early. Collingwood travel interstate to take on the Fremantle Dockers in a massive interstate clash. Historically, we do quite well against Fremantle. We travel to Perth. We're 50-50 as far as the record is concerned. Won 7 of our 14 games when travelling to Perth. I can't say the same thing for their neighbours in the West Coast Eagles. We've won only 5 out of 21 games at Perth versus the West Coast Eagles. We actually have a losing record overall versus West Coast since their inception to AFL, which is an interesting little side fact, but probably useless towards the game we have on this Friday. So let's not digress and stay on track. Let's look at the injury list to begin with, because it's quite extensive and there's some massive ins as far as debuts are concerned. We have Mychek, who is still a test for the hamstring, so hopefully we see Mychek return to the squad this Friday. Degoe is out with an abdominal injury, so I'm not too sure how long he'll be out for now. I think it's more of a to be continued at this point. Tom Mitchell will remain out with nursing that foot injury. Bo McCreary is a test for that concussion, so hopefully he can get through the last few sessions at training to solidify his spot for the game this Friday. We've got Jamie Elliott also out with a foot. Jack Bytel still out with concussion, I believe. And then Hoskett, Elliott and McInnes were our latest introductions to the injury list from the game against Adelaide. Will Hoskett and Elliott having that hamstring, and Reef McInnes with a concussion. So we've had 3 concussions in the space of 2 weeks. But I guess that is the nature of footy. When you play it properly, you are putting yourself in dangerous positions in most games that you do play. For Fremantle, they've still got Brendan Cox out with a hamstring for 4 to 6 weeks. Typically, he plays in the back line as an intercept marker alongside Luke Ryan, but he will not feature. O'Driscoll with a knee is one of their younger players who is typically on the wing. And then Sean Darcy is set to return. So we'll talk a little bit more about him in a ruck, along with Luke Jackson against the likes of Darcy Cameron and Mason Cox a little bit later in this video. Last time Collingwood met was late last year in round 18. Collingwood won 18-5-113 to 10-7-67 in the Pies' favour, of course. The game was over pretty early. I think we kicked 10 goals won in the second quarter, which pretty much iced the game, and we were extremely accurate in front of goal, kicking 13 goals and 2 behinds from set shots alone. Darcy Moore was one of the outstanding performers for that game. He had 19 disposals, 6 intercept marks, 4 contested marks, and 4 score involvements to add the cherry to the top. As usual, Nick Dacos and Josh Dacos did their thing as they typically do. Nick Dacos had 36 disposals, 1 goal, 2 behinds, 11 contested possessions, 2 goal assists, and 11 score involvements, which was a game high. And if you were wondering, he spent 71% of the time in the midfield. So he's played against the Dockers in the midfield capacity, which we'll likely see him do this Friday. Josh Dacos, 31 disposals, 12 contested possessions, which is unusual for a wing position. I don't think he played in the midfield at all that game, so to get 12 contested possessions on a wing is a massive effort. 1 goal and 1 goal assist. And Ash Johnson kicked 3 goals in that game, so we'll save that conversation for a little bit later as far as team selection is concerned. Some of the Dockers players that we need to keep an eye on going into this game based on their performance against us in that last game, we're probably looking at players like Brayshaw, who collected 30 disposals and 13 contested possessions. A little, I guess, wild card is Jager O'Meara. He had 30 disposals, 14 contested possessions, 11 ground ball gets, and 10 clearances, which were all game highs, along with a goal. But it was interesting, he didn't collect any coaches' votes. And obviously, given the fact that Collingwood pumped Freo, maybe that's probably the ultimate reason why Jager O'Meara wasn't awarded with any coaches' votes. But he was outstanding in that game. And if I'm not mistaken, he will be playing this Friday night. So I say a wild card because he's sort of a player of the past who is probably beyond his prime and has sort of succumbed to injuries and form. But it seems like he likes to play against Collingwood. So just be mindful that he might want to come out and have a bit more of an impact than he typically has done so in this season thus far. The other player we need to keep an eye on who played well against us last time and is having an exceptional season this season so far is Josh Tracy. He kicked 3 goals against us last time, and last season he kicked 15 goals in 17 games. Like I said, 3 of those against Collingwood. But so far this season he's played 10 games thus far and he's already kicked 20 goals as a second key tall behind Jai Miss. And what's more is he only has 4 behinds to those 20 goals that he has this season. So he's extremely accurate in front of goal, and he's already eclipsed what he earned as far as the goal tally was concerned last season. So must keep a tab on him. So what about the Dockers so far from a key team stats perspective this year? Fremantle are the #1 side, and these are all in the last 5 matches. I like to look at recent history as opposed to the last 10 games. I think last 5 matches will give us a better view and scope on what Fremantle are about right now, form-wise, stats-wise, etc., etc. But they're the #1 side for marks inside 50, which is obviously no more thanks to players like Jai Miss, you've got Josh Tracy, Luke Jackson, Nat Fyfe rolling through there. So plenty of options, and it must mean they're moving the ball well enough to have these marks inside 50, as they're not a massive contested mark team when I last checked their, I guess, contested mark stats really. Along with that, they're the #1 uncontested ball side in the comp, so they clearly love keep winning the ball on the outside and keeping it there, whether it be by hands or by foot. So we're probably not going to see as much as a contested ball. I'm pretty sure with Freo's games, the contested possession count is quite low, generally speaking, relative to other games. I think they're like -20 below where the top echelons are of the contested ball resides right now with the better teams in that stat. But what they do is Freo's, because they keep the ball so well, they bring down the players, the teams they verse, as far as the contested count is concerned, and becomes more of an outside game. The other stat which they've done really well in this last 5 matches is their stoppage clearances and clearances in general. They're #2 behind Carlton, obviously mainly due to their stoppage work. However, the caveat is they are middle of the pack from scores from stoppages. So while they do dominate clearances, they don't always turn them into goals. In Fremantle's last game, they played against St Kilda, who are also a defensively sound team most of the time. Obviously, offensively, we know they're lacking there a little bit, but in the end, the game was 9-18-72 to 8-7-55 in Fremantle's favour, winning by 17 points and had 31 scoring shots to 15. So the expected score was 104 to 54 in Fremantle's favour. So if Fremantle kicked straight, based on the expected score, it should have been there should have been a wider gap in margins. So we know that just going off by that expected score, that Fremantle are going much better than what the final score actually suggests. Let's talk about the best performers from that game as far as the Fremantle side is concerned, where Caleb Sarong, who was the highest rated player for the game, he had 30 disposals, 14 contested possessions, 11 ground ball gets, and 9 clearances. And then just beneath him was Luke Jackson, 25 disposals, 21 of them contested, 15 ground ball gets and 10 clearances. So a massive performance and output by Luke Jackson. I'm interested to see what the reintroduction of Sean Darcy does to those sort of impacts that Luke Jackson's able to have when he is the sole ruckman. We know that now with Sean Darcy included, Luke Jackson's going to have to spend more time forward and find a way into the game without being in the ruck for the majority of the game. Finally, Hayden Young was really good. He had 27 disposals, 9 contested possessions, 12 score involvements, and could have had a few goals himself. He ended the game with 3 behinds. Dockers, they brought the heat all game long. They were plus 21 in tackles, 84 to 63, which is something Collingwood pride themselves on. So let's see. Fremantle typically don't actually accumulate that many tackles, but without me watching this game, I wonder how this manifested. But nevertheless, they were plus 21, 84 tackles is an amazing count for a game, and were quite well balanced in score sources, and they only conceded 2 goals, 5 behinds from turnovers, being 17 points, and they only conceded 1 goal, 4 being 10 points from the defensive half against the Saints. So completely nullified any of St Kilda's score sources for the entirety of the game, only scoring 55 points. Looking in the VFL, we are quite undermanned at the moment given the amount of opportunities that have been provided to players at VFL level who have been knocking on the doors of the AFL. With the injuries we have and the extensive list that I just pointed to before, being 14 players currently, there was always going to be an opportunity for these VFL players to come up. So what did we see? Charlie Dean did really well, 21 disposals, 8 marks, 7 intercept possessions. Does he come into the side this week? Unlikely. If he was, I think it'd be a case of with Jordan De Goey being out, we'd have to swing Billy Frampton forward and plug him in to the back line, or Billy Frampton would have to be dropped, which is not going to happen. I don't really see Frampton being swung forward either for this game. So while Charlie Dean is playing really well in the VFL and starting to string together some great games, I think his opportunity is going to come around sooner rather than later, but I don't think it's going to arrive this week. We all know how much I've been harping on about Ned Long, who came from Hawthorn and is doing a great job in the VFL, collecting 20 disposals, 12 contested possessions, and 11 tackles for the game against the Werribee Tigers. I'm not sure if I mentioned the score. We lost 48-100 as well, so 52-point margin, unfortunately, in the end. But yeah, really promising from Ned Long, and just daring to put his hand up for the mid-season draft. I'm not sure if he has nominated himself, but he's definitely worth a look in, if not at Collingwood, maybe at another club, because he's doing really well, and he's a workhorse on both sides. 11 tackles along with the contested possessions and the disposals, and he has a knack to score goals as well. I think there's a lot of potential there. Ash Johnson, just the 5 disposals and the 1 goal. He could have been a straight swap for Jordan De Goey this weekend, but I don't know if his form warrants it, and I think I'd almost go a Nathan Kruger before him if he's available. I don't think he played in the VFL. I did notice there was a DMP, so I'm not too sure what's happening with Nathan Kruger, if he was nursing an injury or just management, or if he was on the emergencies for the AFL. I'm not too sure. But Ed Allen, he had 17 disposals, kicked a goal, was the coach's MVP as voted by Josh Fraser, the VFL coach, and has subsequently been rewarded with a shot in the AFL against the Dockers in his hometown, Western Australia. So I wish all the best to Ed Allen, and hopefully he can show us something to keep his spot in the squad for a little longer. Will Parker had 15 disposals and showed really good defensive craft, and similar to Ed Allen, has been given an opportunity to feature against the Fremantle Dockers. He is a halfback flanker, so I'm not too sure if that's the role he'll fulfill, or if he'll start as a sub and then just, I guess, fill the role that needs filling if there's an injury or a tactical change. So well done to Will Parker. Category B rookie, has barely been at the helm of Collingwood for a few months. I think he played Big Bash less than 100 days ago, so there's obviously a lot of potential behind him, and he's only played a couple games in the VFL in the last few weeks, so clearly there's something to really like about Will Parker if he's coming in this early. So how do Collingwood win? Well, we know Fremantle are quite defensively sound and they like to play their games on their terms and keep it as an uncontested game. But if Collingwood force the game to become a hard contest initially and play fast out from the contest, I think that will cause some struggles for Fremantle. Obviously, as I mentioned before, Fremantle not the greatest contested possession side, and I think that's simply just to do with the way they go about their game plan. They only average 119 contested possessions compared to Collingwood, who average 139. So it's just a matter of which way does the game swing. Does it favour a Collingwood game style or a Fremantle game side? I think that will largely dictate which way the game goes as far as the result's concerned. And as I mentioned before, Fremantle are a really good stoppage side, the number 1 stoppage side and number 2 for clearances as a whole, but they don't score very well. Middle of the pack, while Collingwood, they don't get, I think they're middle of the pack for stoppage clearances, but they're second for scores from stoppages. That's the biggest difference. Can you do your damage from all the domination you get from clearances from a Fremantle perspective? And could Collingwood continue to win limited or break even in the stoppage count, but outscore them from that score source? That will be another big narrative in the game. The other thing I want to keep an eye on is, can the youngsters continue to build on their form? I'm talking about players like Joe Richards, Finlay McRae, Harvey Harrison, and Lockie Sullivan, being a bit older but still new to the AFL. Joe Richards has been outstanding. Finlay McRae has filled a role as a half-forward flanker. Harvey Harrison has played really well in that wing position, which has allowed Steele Sidebottom to shift into the half-back flank position that he possesses right now, and has further allowed Nick Dacos to thrive in the midfield. So can we see those young lads continue to build on their game, cause competition for players outside of the squad right now, and players that are injured, and really have Fly McRae second-guess his decisions, and ultimately give us flexibility with positional changes that we've seen success in with Steele Sidebottom and Nick Dacos featuring full-time in the midfield now. I really do think we have a perfect midfield concoction right now, with that midfield trio being Jack Crisp, Scott Pendlebury and Nick Dacos, all having 80% of the centre bounce attendances from the last game. Lachie Sullivan was the next closest at 26%, and Jordan De Goey in the game against Adelaide had 0% time in the midfield. So when he does come back from injury, I wonder if he continues to play that forward role until something needs to change. We know that in the finals, De Goey is going to be very handy in the midfield and probably will end up being a 50-50 split, maybe even a 60-40, 70-30 in the favour of midfield. But for now, we really need somebody to do a job in the forward line, but unfortunately that's not going to be this week with Jordan De Goey out. I really think Fremantle will try and stretch our forward line with the likes of Luke Jackson, who will probably roll more forward, with Sean Darcy being returning to the team. And then you got Jai Miss and Josh Tracy, who are doing really well within their own rights and really breaking out onto the AFL stage. And given the fact that Fremantle are the #1 side for marks inside 50, I really do think Billy Frampton, Darcy Moore and Braden Maynard could have their hands full this Friday. Now, what are the matchups that I'm looking forward to that you guys might want to keep a tab on? Number 1 is Nick Dacos versus Caleb Sarong. Both the 4th and 5th highest rated players in the comp, Nick Dacos being number 4 and Caleb Sarong being number 5. Both contested balls. There's been a bit of criticism behind Nick Dacos' kicking efficiency, particularly from the game on the weekend. I think that might just be a glitch in the matrix. I think Nick Dacos' ball use is elite. In the contest where he's still sort of just getting used to is something that's going to take time. I think he missed a couple shots on goal that went out on a full, which made his kicking efficiency look worse than what it actually is. So I don't think there's too much to stress about there. It's just more of an adaptive period for Nick Dacos going from an outside game on the halfback flank into the midfield. Sarong is rightfully going to be a handful for Collingwood this weekend. He's averaging 33 disposals per game, which is the highest in the league. He's 4th for contested possessions. He's the #1 ground ball get player, and I think he collects 8 of those per game. The next matchup that could transpire on a weekend is something like a Luke Ryan versus a Lachie Schultz. Obviously, old mates, having Lachie Schultz coming from Fremantle just last season, with Luke Ryan currently averaging 2.5 intercept marks per game as a medium-sized defender. I think that's a really intriguing assignment that Lachie Schultz would probably like to take on. He must know a little bit about how Luke Ryan likes to go about his game. So what better than to put Lachie Schultz on Luke Ryan, his old buddy, and see if he can disrupt his intercept marking game. He's collecting 25 disposals per game and going at 8 rebounds per game, which is top tier amongst the medium-sized defenders. So I think Lachie Schultz will be licking his lips at an opportunity like that to take on Luke Ryan. Finally, Darcy Cameron and Mason Cox versus Luke Jackson and Sean Darcy. You guys know how big I am on someone like Darcy Cameron right now. He is the best marking ruckman in the league. So he will have a big challenge when it comes to facing up against Sean Darcy when it comes to the hitouts. But I think Darcy Cameron is someone who can beat Sean Darcy around the grounds and almost match it with someone like Luke Jackson. Probably not on the ground ball gets realm, but at the very least he'll be able to take it up to Luke Jackson in the marking and running capacities as well. Mason Cox is going to have to pinch hit at some point. He hasn't taken the statistical sheet by storm recently, but we know that's not what Mason Cox is known for. He's there to be a nuisance and bring the ball to ground. So let's see how all those matchups go, and really looking forward to this one. We know Collingwood love taking on and relish the challenge of playing interstate, and those wins just do so much for the team and galvanise the team for the rest of the season. So let's go Pies.